Okay, I think we'll get started, and then if people join as I'm speaking, then that's fine. So, good afternoon, and welcome to today's event with RICS fellow Sharon Slinger in conversation with architect Alison Davies as part of our International Women's Day programme. I'm Lucy Grierson, Partnerships Manager in the RIBA East Midlands office. This year's International Women's Day theme is Choose to Challenge, with the onus on all of us to call out gender bias and inequality when we see it. We can also do more to celebrate and give a platform to women's achievements, which is what today's event is all about. So, as well as being part of the RIBA's wider International Women's Day celebrations, this event is part of a regional programme of activities organised in partnership with the RIBA East Midlands 2 Women in Architecture groups, with generous support from Ibstock Brick. We've got a final event taking place later today as well, so I'll share the details in the chat later. I'll introduce Sharon in a moment, but just some housekeeping first. The event is being recorded, and if I could ask that while Sharon and Alison are speaking, you keep your cameras off and yourselves muted, that would be great. Sharon will give her presentation and will then be joined in conversation by Chartered Architect Alison Davies, who is co-founder and partner at Urban Fabric Architects and heads Design Studio Unit 5A at the University of Nottingham. There will be time for questions at the end of the session. Feel free to post any questions in the chat during the event. And if you'd like to turn your camera on to ask your question in person, when you're invited to do so, that'll be fine. We'll aim to finish by no later than 2 p.m. So, to our speaker. We're delighted to be joined by Sharon Slinger. Having worked in the construction and facilities management industry for over 20 years as a chartered quantity surveyor, Sharon is now Director of Constructing Rainbows, working with built environment organisations to improve their business through the implementation of diversity and inclusion strategies. I'll now hand over to Sharon. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks for having me come and speak to you. It's a pleasure to do so. So I'm just going to go through for the next kind of 10-15 minutes where my career's come from and where it's made changes as we've gone along. Because as Lucy says, I've started life off as a chartered QS and now focusing on diversity and inclusion. So yeah, when we come to the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions. So please do start thinking about them and putting them in the chat. So where did it all start? I'm Yorkshire born and bred and still living up here in Leeds. I come from a farming background, and when I was like getting to my A-level time, I was like, oh, what do I do as a career? And I think the only thing I could think of was that I didn't want to be a farmer. So as I was like wondering what to do, I filled in one of those career interest questionnaires. I'm sure some of you may have done that, where you fill in kind of what you're good at, what you're kind of enjoy, and then it pops out at the top what it thinks you might want to do. And at the top came quantity surveying, and I was like, what is this quantity surveying? I don't even know what it is. So I looked into it, and I was always pretty good at maths, and this used maths, but not in a kind of in the office all the time, which is what I really didn't want to do. And a friend at school, her dad happened to be a quantity surveyor, so I got the opportunity to go and do a couple of weeks work experience whilst I was in sixth form, and I thought, you know what, it looks quite good. It looks like I might enjoy this and kind of building things as well. So I ended up going to Northumbria Uni, where I studied BSc in quantity surveying, and I guess that's kind of the start of my journey. I did get sponsorship whilst at university, and I guess the story behind that was I was supposed to. Northumbria was my second choice university. I was supposed to be going to UMIST, which had a fully sponsored course. So I'd, applied for jobs or sponsorship from these various companies, and managed to get sponsorship from what was Bovis back then. And I worked for them the summer before I went to university, and then as my A-level results came through, and I didn't do very well at all, I didn't get into UMIST, but Northumbria said they'd have me, which was positive. And Bovis said that actually they would sponsor me at Northumbria as well. So I was really pleased with that, because what could have been an absolute disaster actually was the start of a very good career. So whilst at Bovis, some of the first site experience I got was kind of, my first project was on a hospital. Every summer I worked for Bovis in between my studies, and I had my placement year there. So I kind of got to work on hospitals and schools, and it was a really good opportunity working on these massive contracts, which I still look back. If the bottom right is the cancer hospital in Leeds, and you can see that on the skyline as you enter Leeds, and it's what it's like when you can. It's great when you can say you helped to build that, especially when you start to get kids and you can tell the kids that as well. So yeah, Bovis obviously changed to Bovis Lend-Lease and is now Lend-Lease. After 4 years of study, I graduated with a 2-1. So I think Northumbria were probably pleased they took a gamble on me at that early stage. And then after a few years, I managed to, with the support of Bovis, who had a really good scheme to help people pass their assessment of professional competence at the RICS. And it was a really proud moment, my A levels were a low, and I gave it a few years, and I was a chartered quantity surveyor, and really very proud of that. A few years after graduation, I got the opportunity to go to Australia. So Lend-Lease, as some of you may know, is an Australian company, and their head office is in Sydney. So I got the opportunity to go and work at their head office for a couple of years. The picture on the top left is Darling Harbour, and our view was looking out from my desk, looking out over Darling Harbour. It was really amazing place to be. Some of the projects I worked on there were, I was in the retail business unit, so we worked on these massive shopping centres. In Australia, because of the heat, they have a lot of indoor shopping centres, which at that time were pretty much all air conditioned. I'm sure these days they've got a bit more sustainable around that. But it was really great, when I was doing site visits, I was flying across Australia to Perth, up to Brisbane, down to Melbourne, and they were kind of all my projects, which is really good. Then after a couple of years, I came back home and I switched my view from the desk of Darling Harbour for a site office in Wakefield, looking out over a dirty site. A lot of my friends asked why I'd come back, but actually, it's back home, and Yorkshire is my home. So following on from that, I worked for Laing O'Rourke. That's a data centre on the left. We did some schools in the Building Schools for Future programme, and then recession hit, and I then moved to a smaller company, Elliott, although they're a huge company, but their building division was a bit smaller, and worked on some smaller projects around the country, again predominantly kind of school extensions and that kind of thing. I had a short stint at Gleeds, where I decided I really was a contractors QS and not a PQS. But I think they're all good kind of learning opportunities, and it's important to kind of try new things out. So when did I get into diversity inclusion? So this here is my dissertation, and so it was obvious to me that when I got to university and I was on the course and there was only kind of 5 or 6 women on the course, that I was a bit different, and actually why was that? Why were there not very many women on this course? So my dissertation, Darwinian and other analogies applied to the prospects for the survival of women in quantity surveying, was showing my interest in diversity and inclusion, even though it wasn't necessarily called that at the time. I really enjoyed actually doing the research on that around the people aspects. And so then throughout my kind of early career, I did help out with kind of going into schools and speaking to girls and that kind of thing like that a lot of people do. And then I went to Carillion, and you know, for all its faults, I actually really enjoyed it whilst I was there. I helped to set up the Carillion LGBT network. So basically, I'd seen my wife, who was chair of the PwC LGBT network, and seen what a positive impact that was having. So what I did was I went to kind of my boss at Carillion, and I said, look, I think it'd be great if we could set up an LGBT network here. And I listed out kind of the benefits, the business benefits, that kind of thing. And he passed it on up the chain, because at Carillion there was a big chain. And it finally landed with the head of HR there, who was like, this is brilliant. We were looking at doing something anyway, so I'm really glad you've come forward. It was a great couple of years there, and you know, I could really see kind of the impact, the real positive impact that having the network was doing. For example, my co-chair had his line manager came to me and said, look, you know, we've seen a real difference in his confidence, and that's really positively impacted on his work. And this kind of demonstrated to me how important it was for people to feel that kind of sense of belonging in the organisation that they're in. My work with Connect got broader, and I helped, you know, implement the diversity and inclusion strategy throughout Carillion, and I could really see kind of the impact that was happening. At that stage, I reached out to other chairs of LGBT networks within FM to see whether they wanted to get together and create kind of an industry-wide network. So that was, we also founded LGBT Plus in FM. And this is still, you know, I'm still involved with this today. And again, it's about understanding that it's not about competition, it's about working together to support individuals within the industry. So around a similar time, I co-founded with, oh, hello? No. I co-founded with some friends of mine at Steer Support and Mentoring. So this, what we'd found was that we were, as an industry, we were getting people to university, you know, we're doing lots of work in schools, and actually we were losing lots and lots of people whilst at university and in the 6 months following following graduation. So we set up Steer, which basically we match industry final year built environment students with industry professionals for a year-long mentoring programme. Now this is having it, we started it at Leeds Beckett and have expanded to Nottingham Trent this year. And it's having a really great impact on the mentees, but also the mentors. We get great feedback from the mentors that they're learning a lot from the mentees that are, you know, about to enter our industry. All our mentors are from underrepresented groups, because we thought that was really important to give people role models that I might not see on a kind of day-to-day basis. I mean, I never had a female line manager in my career. But all the mentees, you know, we accept anybody on as mentees, but what we're finding is actually we're attracting mentees from underrepresented groups as well. And the main aims are about kind of growing confidence and creating connections and community for kind of final year students before they're entering the workplace. And by doing that, I mean, we've all been in situations where, you know, it's who you know and not necessarily what you know that gets you places. So actually, we're wanting to provide people with connections within the industry to start off with. So that's another hat that I've got. So when I left Carillion, I got out just before the end. Voluntary redundancy was offered, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to get promoted in the next few years because, you know, it was documented about Carillion's commercial issues. And I thought, you know what, there's voluntary redundancy. I'm really enjoying, like, you know, my passion now is diversity and inclusion. You know, could I set up by myself and help to support others across the industry and really make an impact on a wider scale than necessarily working for one organisation? So that's when I came up with the idea for Constructing Rainbows. And that was at the end of 2017. And, you know, it was tough to start off with. It is, anybody who's got their own business knows it is tough to start off with. But actually now I've been working across various different kind of groups of people across the built environment, some of which are detailed here on the slide, and, you know, helping them to have an impact on their organisations and on industry. It's really, you know, really great, and we've had some really good kind of responses and really good, I guess, wins, and it's great to see how, you know, I'm not going to lie, it's not the whole industry that's working together on this, but it's great to see that there are some leaders in diversity and inclusion, and there's a lot of will now to make those improvements. So basically what I do with my clients is, first of all, I get to understand the business. You know, with my commercial background, I fully understand that there's got to be a business case for it, as well as it kind of being the moral case to do it. So yeah, get to understand the business, and then we work on kind of the overall diversity and inclusion strategy, which we make sure that we tie into the overall business strategy. I think sometimes with diversity and inclusion, we do an initiative here, an initiative there. You know, we get International Women's Day comes up, and it was great to see so many posts out on Monday, I think it was. But actually, what's happening behind that? What are the real changes that are happening to kind of the systems and the processes that are in place? And then I help them with kind of action planning. You know, these are your issues, these are your objectives, how are you going to resolve those? Here's just kind of a few examples of the things that I work on with my clients. You know, things from setting up steering groups, affinity networks, through to kind of tender submissions, line managers toolkits, that kind of thing. But the important thing to know is it's bespoke, what I do. So, you know, we know kind of roughly what the issues are within the industry, but we don't know the specific issues that are within each company unless we really kind of dig into and find out what those problems are. And some of that is through kind of data collection, but sometimes it's through talking to people, and sometimes it's as simple as some organisations just haven't got a mechanism to get feedback from their employees about what it's really like to work there. So, you know, I work with each individual company to help them to understand what their issues are and what their focus areas should be, and then we can start to tackle them. I also do various volunteer roles. So I've talked about steer, but I'm also a board member of RICS Yorkshire and Humber, CIC Yorkshire and Humber, and their D&I panel. And we've talked about LGBT and FM. So the reason I got involved with these is because I think these industry organisations that are talking to government, that are leading the way, that are kind of creating the rules for Build Back Better, etc., they need to have that diverse representation on there, because otherwise we're going to be led down a route of the same as before, and we're not going to get those new ideas, and we're not going to kind of take on board kind of different people's experiences. And so actually, you know, I would really urge all of you to get involved in these boards and put your name forward and try and make that change from within, rather than necessarily, I think sometimes we find, and this isn't a criticism, but we find it difficult to kind of break through that kind of I guess the ranks that are there, the old boys club that's there. It's difficult to break through, so we might set up a kind of a women's group, which are really important. Don't get me wrong, I'm part of a number of them, but unless we break down those kind of, you know, industry organisations, then we're not going to get that change. So that's what I'm trying to do by being involved in those, to create that change from within. I also do some awards judging, so the Inspire Awards. Probably should just do a bit of a plug. They're open at the moment, and they're diversity and inclusion awards specifically for our industry. So they're, you know, a really great example of, you know, if you're winning an award there, those are the awards for our industry. And also kind of CIBSE Yorkshire, Constructing Excellence in Yorkshire and Humber. Again, it's bringing in kind of that diverse voice to the judging panels, because it brings in kind of different ideas and challenging things. And then outside of the industry, I'm involved in, I'm a trustee for a multi-academy trust in a deprived area, and also regional diversity champion for the Lib Dems. So that's me, my first bit done.
Great, thank you very much, Sharon. That's really really interesting to get a kind of overview of who you are and sort of how it's all come together. We've got a little bit of feedback, actually. I wonder if there's anybody with their mic on, apart from myself and Sharon. Okay, well, let's press on. So we're going to start off with a bit of a conversation between us, if we can deal with the feedback. Sorry about that. I'll just turn things down this end a little bit. Okay, I don't know whether that's made any difference. So Sharon, and then we're inviting anybody who's interested in getting involved in the conversation, please do. And there are a couple of ways to do that. One is to stick your hand up and we'll invite you to speak directly. The other is to put your question in the chat and we'll pick it up. So as soon as anybody's got any questions for Sharon, please do fire away. In the meanwhile, I just want to pick up on a couple of things that you've said, Sharon. So the first thing is, I'm quite interested in the idea that you say you came from a farming background. The one thing you were sure is you didn't want to be a farmer. Just double checking now, still sure that that was the right decision.
Yeah, it's funny. My mum, my dad died when I was quite little, and my mum was always, because there's 5 of us, so 4 girls and a boy, and my mum was like quite adamant as well that we wouldn't be farmers, and then she went and married another farmer, so it was like she was telling us one thing and then like and then doing the opposite herself. But no, definitely the right decision. I mean, I've still got a lot of family that are farmers, and I see the struggles that they're going through at the moment, and yeah, I much prefer to be building buildings.
Yeah, and does it still feel like building buildings? Do you miss being out on site?
Yeah, so with Steer, we do, well, usually normal times, non-COVID times, we do a site visit once a year, and it's great because it's my opportunity to, like, you know, I'm walking through Leeds, I see a site that looks good, I like get in touch, and it's like, can we have a site visit? And I get to put my hard hat on and have a walk around, and so I do miss that, and the team camaraderie you get on sites. You know, some of it can be negative, but also there's some really positive elements. It's kind of like a big family, I guess, with negative and positive elements to it. And I miss kind of bacon butties every Friday.
So I'm quite interested in there's maybe a reputation in the building industry that site is one of the more challenging places to be a woman amongst men, but that's not necessarily been my experience, and I wonder whether you feel similarly, or how you would sort of characterise the different places that you've worked.
Yeah, so I think there's a difference in the way it's perceived. So on site, it can be quite open and blatant, you know, sexism, racism, whatever. It can be quite open. In the offices, it's still there, but it's hidden. And, you know, I don't know whether it's people, not the right, clever is not the right word, but they know not to say things openly. But actually the systems and the processes that are set up to that put barriers in place for certain people are still there. I think when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we start to see some traction within the office environment, and sometimes it's like, actually site's too hard, so we'll park that and do the office first. And actually, if you're looking to be a kind of inclusive organisation, it needs to be throughout. I think there's also the challenge of attracting women onto site. You know, I think that's changing. I think we've seen some really great role models come out. In fact, even just kind of over the last few weeks, I've seen examples of women who lost their jobs in retail and hospitality and are now trying something new, and they're trying construction, and you know, you hear from them and they're really enjoying it. And the more role models we get like that, that are sharing kind of the positive experiences rather than all the negative that we hear, because it's negative always that gets out in the press, the mainstream media, and actually we don't necessarily share the positives that are out there. So I think we're starting to see that now, which is really great. But it is, yeah, there are definitely challenges on site with, I guess, number of, you know, the demographics of people that are out on site, but also kind of the kind of blatant, open kind of discrimination that you hear.
And so if we pick up then the change from being a quantity surveyor to moving into diversity and inclusion in your own business, I mean, the first thing is, do you think that the computer algorithm that suggested QSing to you would now be updated enough to be able to suggest that as a career option?
That's really interesting, actually. I don't even know whether it would come as a career option. I think it's interesting, actually. My eldest, who's 10, wants to be Prime Minister, and we said you need to have a career before you become Prime Minister, because you need to have an understanding of kind of the you know, the world and business and what have you. And I think it's similar with what I've done, because the reason I focus on the built environment is because that's what I know. I know the industry, I know what the issues are, and then, you know, I can help to address them because of that knowledge. So whether it would pop up as a career question in a survey at school, I'm not sure it will yet.
Maybe that's your next target audience, is to get under the skin of those computer algorithms. So I also did something like that at the same stage, A-levels, and it churned out architect, and that was one of the motivations for going to do architecture. So they're clearly influential, those things. Although, interestingly, other suggestions it had for me were to work as a prison officer or as a librarian. So there's some interesting alternative careers that might have happened. No idea what questions you have to answer to get those three choices. But
I do wonder whether maybe like RICS or RIBA needs to sponsor these career questionnaires and get it bumped up a bit.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, I'm interested in the work that you do now. You talked about making the business case as well as the moral case, and that's quite a kind of interesting position that we all have to take in, you know, surviving in business. What might be the things that you take overtly to an organisation, and what might be the covert operations that are happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a massive issue in our industry is the skills shortage, and we've talked about it for years and years and years, but then we still only really focus on kind of attracting the kind of middle-aged white men area. And you're like, actually, there's this huge pool of talent out there, and if we're attracting all of them, we get to pick the best out of all of them, and suddenly kind of it opens their eyes to, you know, I usually do kind of a pie chart of, you know, we're selecting from this area here at the moment, and we want to be selecting from all of that. And actually, you know, when people kind of understand that, it kind of opens their eyes, and it's really tangible for them to go, actually, I can see how that can address an issue now. I think another thing we're seeing is kind of the direct nature of winning work. So a lot of clients now are starting to ask for kind of the supply chain to be more active on diversity and inclusion, and actually, you know, one of the things I want to see more of is the client pushing up that, you know, 2 or 3% to kind of get to kind of 10%, and then that might really have an impact. But, you know, you look at kind of HS2, who I would say probably are kind of the leading project in this area. I think they've got more diversity and inclusion personnel there than the rest of the industry. Like, you know, they are really focusing on that and skills. So I think we'll definitely see going forward, and it's going to filter down the supply chain as well, because, you know, some of my kind of main contractor clients were working on kind of how that procurement process is in place. So I think that they're kind of some of the areas that are kind of will affect the bottom line, because if you can get the talent in and you get winning the projects and things, then, you know, that's kind of where your profit margins come from. I think underlying all of that, and you know, it's specifically from the underrepresented groups, it's just the right thing to do. Like, it's just the right thing not to discriminate against people. It's just the right thing to have everybody have the open doors that everybody else has. But actually, you know, sometimes it takes that, depending on who you're talking to, it takes that kind of business case to just give people a bit of a shove down the right route. Mm-hmm.
And do you ever, I mean, presumably you're brought into organisations by choice, but do you ever experience resistance to your message, let's say?
Obviously not from the people that have brought me in, but from others that are kind of in the senior leadership area. Yes, there is. And especially over this last year, you know, people prior to COVID who were fully on board and, yeah, let's do this, this and this, suddenly COVID's hit, and they're like, we need to focus on, like, saving money. And you're like, absolutely, you need to focus on saving money, but the way that you'll do that is not by closing ranks into kind of a small group of people, but actually bringing in these new ideas and new experiences to come out with a great innovative solution that is going to help you to build back better. And some organisations get that and have totally been on it this year, and, you know, had a short-term switch to supporting their staff through the horrors of COVID. and then building up to back to where they were again. And then others have just kind of just switched the dial. And I think it's been really an eye-opener the last year, those that get it and get the importance of it, whether it's crisis point or not, and those that kind of will do it when everything's comfortable, but then not when actually they should be stepping it up. So I think I think it's been an eye-opener this year.
Well, the COVID situation has exposed all sorts of maybe slightly more hidden issues of inequality between, typically women and men's sort of additional labour at home or additional caring responsibility. So do you think that this last year is going to change the focus of the work that you're doing? Has this brought new ways of understanding people's difference and different experiences into the light a bit more?
Yeah, so I think in some respects, it's fast forwarded a few things. So, the working from home, the tech, like, this time last year, had we really heard of Zoom? Probably only minimally. But now everyone has the setup. Well, not everybody, obviously, the people on site still have to go on site, but the office-based people have the setup now at home, and that's not going to go. That's there always. And actually, one of my friends actually just did a blog on LinkedIn about how it's made her family life and many others a lot easier, because there were a group of people who would never have allowed people to work from home, for example. And because we've been forced to work from home, we've seen how it can work. And now I think there's also a large group of people that don't ever want to go back to kind of the 5-day in the office working week. And companies are realizing that they have to adapt to that. And the best companies are asking their employees, how do you want to work when you come back? And actually there can be some positives to that financially if you get your office sorted, so you don't need as big an office. That's a saving. But also, if you've got happier people who aren't having to commute for an hour, 2 hours every day, they can be spending that time, either with family or working or doing some people like exercise. But it's that work-life balance is becoming more to the fore. I think you're right. There has been definitely inequalities in the way COVID's affected. It has been, I've got 2 kids myself. It's been pretty stressful trying to homeschool whilst working at the same time. And you're right, a lot of that, not all of it, has landed on women, and we are hearing that women were having to cut down their hours, or some actually handed in their jobs, handed in their notice because they couldn't cope with all that going on at the same time. That we need to make sure we're addressing. I think also in the recession in 2008, we found that proportionally more women left the industry than men. I think, I'm hoping that this data is being collected now when people are going through redundancy processes or whatever, because I think we'll find that something similar is happening at the moment. And that's really sad to see, because, when you look at the graphs, you can see we dipped in 2008 and we've been gradually working our way up. And if we dip again, all that kind of last 20 years or whatever is all that hard work has disappeared. So I think also we need to remember as well, when we're working from home, how does that affect younger people who would normally have been in the office and picking up conversations and asking questions and as you do when you first start out. How are we going to make sure that if this is a longer term solution, that they get those opportunities as well. And you know, for some people, working from home was awful, and you know, they might have been in shared accommodation, or they might have issues in the home life, and you know, we can't go from just assuming that like everybody wants to work from home, because that's not the case. So as with all of this, it's about understanding the individual needs and individual wants, and then tying that into how the business runs, and finding that kind of, you know, the Venn diagram, the middle bit where business needs and individual needs cross over and we're all happy.
Mm. And for the young women, you're quite right about that mentoring stage at the very beginning of our careers. We have a year out student working with us in practice, and we've been very clear that she need, despite COVID, you know, she should be kind of in the office, effectively at home with us, in order to get that experience that only really happens when you're sitting side by side and overhearing wider conversations and so on. So that is a particular challenge, and I'm interested to hear the steer mentoring that you do. I mean, how has that survived during COVID? How would that normally be operating, and how have you dealt with the current challenges there?
Yeah, so we normally we say we want 3 or 4 site office visits in the year. We do, as I said before, our own site visit where we get all the mentees together. We normally have a dinner where we there's a kind of a networking organisation that it gives us a table that we go for dinner, have a few drinks, you know, and it's got a few stands that they can go and talk. Normally kind of at the end of the year have a celebration, so that's changed slightly. Now we are obviously and the other thing that we focus on as well is having local mentors and mentees, so they can do all that in the locality that they are. So obviously this year what we've done, we're doing kind of the online stuff. I think a few people have managed to get out to site in between lockdowns, which is really positive. And we are, you know, we've tried to do a kind of an online kind of get together, but they're not as good, I have to say that. We're working with one contractor who's going to hopefully be doing a kind of a walkthrough site, like a virtual walkthrough site where they can ask questions as they go through. So it's not the same, because one of our main aims is about that community and, you know, the cross-discipline community, because we all know that we get too focused on surveying or architecture or engineering, but actually if you can make friends across discipline from that early age, it could have a really good impact. So I think probably disappointingly they're not getting as much of that whilst COVID's happening, but hopefully next year's intake will be back to normal.
Mm-hmm. So time is marching on, so I want to just reiterate we're very interested in any questions that people might have from our audience. So please hands up or in the chat if there's anything that you wanted to ask Sharon. Meanwhile, you were speaking, oh, we have got a hand up.
Hi, I'm going to say hi, Sharon. I know Sharon. I work with Sharon on with Steer. I'm one of the mentors this year. Just wondering if you could give us a few, maybe your top 3 tips, Sharon, of how we can improve diversity and inclusion within our offices. What are the top things that we can do?
As individuals, I would say kind of open your mind, open your ears and listen. And encourage people to talk about their experiences, because I think that's when we really start to understand. We did briefly mention Harry and Meghan earlier, Alison, and I think that these kind of things are eye openers, because people don't kind of understand people's experiences until they're talked about. So I think that's a kind of my number one for anybody, whether you're a senior leader or a kind of early starter. I think another area, probably number two, is ask if you're in an organisation that isn't or doesn't visibly seem to be doing anything on diversity and inclusion, ask what's going on. You know, can you get involved? Can you prompt something? Some of the things that start from an individual at any level, just putting their hand up and saying, I want us to do something, and I'm willing to kind of lead on it, or if somebody else wants to lead on it, and pull a little group together. You'd be surprised what a big impact a little group of people, passionate people, can have. So that's my kind of number two. My number three, I would say kind of get involved in industry, things that are going on. There's great, as I said before, there's great groups out there, like, I'm part of Women in Surveying, there's Building Equality for LGBT+, there's Black Professionals in Construction, there's lots of kind of groups going on. So if you're not getting traction in your own business, you can go to a supportive group who can help you, and actually they might find you a new job in somewhere that is doing doing more for diversity and inclusion.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. Any other questions? So let's pick up a slightly different angle. Sharon, you mentioned earlier to me outside the meeting that you'd been working with a local university to us, and that there was maybe a little bit of a tension between a kind of instruction or an assumption that your work would be about helping, this was with female students, helping female students kind of grow their confidence or learn to behave in a certain way to fit the industry, and between a sense that actually this is about a cultural shift in the other direction that needs to be more accommodating of the people that we are, with our inbuilt insecurities and our diverse experience of the world. So perhaps you'd like to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. It was groundbreaking at the time. All about kind of women putting themselves forward and women doing this and women doing that. And actually we've moved on from there, and it's not, as I see it, about changing women. There are things that we can do. I mean, I never kind of would ask for a pay rise or a promotion, and that was just stupid. Like, I just should have, why I didn't, I don't know. So there are things that mentoring or support can help with, and I think that's important. But what we need to do is change the system. What we need to do is ensure that the women that are coming in are being themselves. We need to make sure. I think sometimes we find still that the women that get to the top have to have similar traits to the men that are already there. And actually, that whole kind of women are too emotional. Actually, a bit of emotion and empathy is needed. I mean, you only have to look at kind of the women leaders across the globe who've led on the COVID response. So I think what I'm trying to focus on is changing that system rather than changing the individual, because we want all individuals to be themselves, because otherwise we're not getting the benefit of kind of diversity if we're trying to make everybody fit into a system that's so rigid that people have to change to be in it. It's making people unhappy. I mean, it's not just women that are unhappy. The suicide rate in construction is the worst in any industry. So it's making kind of men unhappy as well. And we need to be addressing that and looking at what the issues are and how we can be more embracing of individuals.
And for young women as students or women at the beginning of their careers who before, I mean, we talked about in the kind of context of COVID, things like family responsibilities that might be additional challenges. But when you're starting off, launching off from your successful university career into a world which the starting point is a big gender pay gap already, you know, what advice would you have for young women at that stage in their career?
I would say reach out and ask for help from people. I don't know anybody that would say no if somebody asked for help. You know, sometimes we probably should reach out and offer that help, but we don't. We're busy. We've got, you know, busy lives. But actually, as a young person, just go and ask. You know, I had a call earlier on today with a student who I met the other day, and she wanted help with something, and you know, we make time because we want to support people that are interested in our industry. So it can be quite frightening to reach out to people, but actually, from the reverse perspective, as somebody who's been in the industry for a while, if someone reaches out, you go, do you know what? They've got something about them. You know, they're willing to kind of ask for help or ask for support, and actually that to me signals that they're interested and they're keen, and at the start of you know, your career, that's what you really want to see from people. So yeah, just reach out to kind of build your networks from that early stage.
Okay, thank you very much. I wonder if there's any other questions from anybody in our audience. Okay, in which case I might have, it's 5 to 2. I'm conscious there'll be other things at 2. So Lucy, did you want to wrap up?
Yeah, thank you both so much. It's been brilliant, Sharon, to hear about your career journey, and also just to listen to the conversation between you two. I've really enjoyed it, and I think I mean, there are obviously lots of challenges, but it's also good to hear about some of the positives and the opportunities. I made there were a couple of things that I'd sort of noted when you were talking. So that a small group of passionate people can have big impacts. I think that's something that I'll take away, and we need to change the system. I'm not going to argue with that. And also, I loved your dissertation title. It was brilliant. So thanks again, both of you. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure our audience have really enjoyed it as well. And yeah, thanks to our audience for joining us. Thank you also to our sponsors, Ibstock Brick. And I think if there aren't any other questions, I can see people are typing now, but we're getting lots of thank yous in the chat, so that's really nice. Thank you very much.
I'd just add, if anybody wants to connect on LinkedIn or reach out, then feel free. As I say, I'm always around.
Great, thank you, Sharon. And actually, I'm just actually the thing I did forget to say is that we have got another event this evening as part of this sort of programme of regional events. So I'm just going to share the link for that in the chat as well. But no, thank you. That's been brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And I also loved your dissertation title. And I'm interested, you know, what are the prospects for survival of women in QSing? What were they then? What are they now?
Yeah, it wasn't looking too good back then.
Is it looking better now?
The way I did my research.
I think I'd just like to echo what you said about that sort of making yourself vulnerable in a way, because it can feel very daunting in a kind of business or commercial environment to admit that you're finding it hard, or that you feel your face doesn't fit, or that perhaps you're carrying the sense that there must be something wrong with you. But actually just to sort of say out loud that very many of us have been there and have, you know, encountered challenges along the way, not just the women amongst us, but the men amongst us, and that something about putting your head above the parapet and saying, actually, this bit's not working for me, but I am really keen. So what might we adjust? I think that's a really important message to take away. So yes, thanks for highlighting that, Sharon.